Are you excited for video number 2? Me too. If you guys take a look, we ended off with Napoleon naming himself emperor in 1804. We know that he had a dream of becoming the emperor of all of Europe. He wanted to control the whole continent, kind of like Alexander the Great, if you remember back from 6th grade history. And so he did this by beginning a series of wars with all the neighboring nations, and that's what the Napoleonic Wars actually were. If you look at your notes, I want you to know, first of all, right now, at any time that you need to pause so you can write things down, just pause it to make your life easier. But we're going to start with talking about kind of the good and the bad. Everybody does things that are good. Everybody does things that are bad. Nobody is all one or the other. And that definitely applies to Napoleon as well. If you take a look, Napoleon is best known for restoring order to France. Find that on your notes. If we want to kind of look back on your notes, you guys are going to see this picks up right here with this chart. We're just going to fill in this chart together. So Napoleon was known for restoring order, and that just meant he kind of saw that things were chaotic, especially with the 5 Directory people who just kind of were trying to take it slow and not really taking charge. Napoleon knew that France needed somebody to take charge. So he made some political, social, economic, and religious changes. We said political just means, that's right, government. So political means government. And one way that he changed the government, other than him being absolute ruler again, was that he created a set of laws called the Napoleonic Code. This meant everybody was treated the same. No special treatment for the nobility, none for the clergy. Everybody was equal. Then we have social changes that he made. Napoleon created public schools, and he also gave people jobs based on ability, not just who you were, not just who you knew, like it was for the nobles, but he made it all equal. So he was an equal opportunity employer. You hear that today. Napoleon understood that. If you had the ability, you deserved the job. For economics, he created an equal taxation system for everybody. So everybody was paying the same amount of taxes, and he also established a national banking system, which definitely helped the economy. And then lastly, he pretty much told the church, you need to step out of political affairs. What has to do with the government has to do with the government. What has to do with the church? Well, it has to do with the church. So make sure that you fill in this chart to understand that Napoleon did some positive things. So what does this empire really look like? If you take a look, we're going to fill in right here, just on the map right now, just some key things right down here. So here they are. Here's the French Empire. You can see that there's a color code system here to help you understand exactly what was French controlled, what they gained control of, and kind of who their allies or their buddies were. And allies means that the French forces didn't exactly control it, but they were just kind of friends with them, so they didn't really have to worry about them trying to fight back against them. All these other places just kind of fought back against them. So to the west, if you think never eat soggy watermelons, to the west, it extended into parts of Spain and also into Portugal, because this isn't the original shape of Portugal. And so the French Empire extended into, you can look up here, it says controlled by Napoleon. It extended into Spain and then parts of Portugal. If you go to the east, you see Germany. That's where Germany is right here. It's in the light blue, controlled by Napoleon, all the way down the boot, which is Italy. So it controlled those parts as well. The most successful part is that he was able to conquer all the way up to what they call the British Channel. You may have heard of it as the English Channel, but it's right here. It's the land between the continent of Europe, and then here's Great Britain right here. So just this little land he was able to control all the way up to here. But if you remember, we said that Great Britain was one of the big dogs, that they were important, that France was kind of like their frenemy. They were always fighting. He could not gain control of Great Britain. They had the super awesome navy. And then also he wanted control of Russia. And he really didn't want control of Russia until Russia said, I'm going to be better friends with Great Britain than I'm going to be with you. So Napoleon kind of had to act on that. So we're going to learn later on that he could never control or conquer Great Britain or Russia, which actually later on led to his defeat. So Napoleon made some important changes in France, but he did it through continuing wars. against France's neighbor. So he did it by fighting, by taking over. So it's kind of like he was a tyrant. Napoleon wanted to control all the continent of Europe. So if you take a look back on that big old map in the back of the room, you're going to see Europe was pretty big. And one person controlling all of that land is kind of next to impossible, if you remember how it disintegrated for Alexander the Great. He fought against the British, the Germans, the Spanish, just all these different groups of people. They actually formed what's called the Third Coalition, were just all these people who were fighting against him that didn't want this control, because once he took over, he just maintained all control over these people, and they really didn't like it. So this is what the Napoleonic Wars were. So he crowned himself emperor, but let me tell you the story. What happened is when the Pope walked toward him, what the Pope was supposed to do was supposed to place this crown on his head, but instead Napoleon kind of grabbed the crown out of the Pope's hands, which was a big deal, and he placed it on his own head, like he was being emperor by his own choice. So of course the Catholic Church didn't like it. So whenever he invaded Spain and Portugal, and the Pope was saying, "This isn't a good idea, Mr. Napoleon," he ended up putting the Pope in prison. And then, like we said earlier, the only two countries in Europe that he just could not defeat were Great Britain and Russia. So what I want us to do is, on your map, you've got all of these areas that I want us to identify. And so I'll kind of move this bag over here just to make sure that you get it in place and you understand why it is as it is. I want us first to take a look at what the French Empire was. So circle on your map this whole area right here. The French Empire was generally in this area, and you may want to make it a little bit smaller to kind of cover what really was the French Empire. But the French Empire was just in this area right here. Now, the two places he never could control, one was Russia, and you can put a rectangle around Russia, and then I want you to put a square around Great Britain. So the circle is what he could control, and then he had some difficulty with the corners of Great Britain and then Russia. So identifying that on your map, which you're going to see is on the second page, the back page. You can just kind of go ahead and identify those things there. It's just going to help you out as far as understanding. Now, the next set of slides that we're going to take a look at is just where Napoleon went wrong. Ding. And so that's going to be on the third video. So let's go ahead and finish up this, and then we're going to take a look at the third video. And like I said, at any point that you need to stop and go back and listen, that's cool. You can do it. But there are two ways that Napoleon started to just kind of go wrong. One of them is with nationalism. Now, nationalism is just having that desire for self-rule and that pride in your own country. People of similar cultures come together, and they have these commonalities that just kind of bond them. And so what was happening with nationalism is that whenever he was taking over all of these European countries, they kind of rejected it because they didn't want these French customs and eating croissants and, they just didn't want that. They said, what we want is to rule our own country in our own way. And so they were being nationalistic. So because of nationalism, that was one of the ways that Napoleon started to go wrong. Another way is that he started to stretch his army too thin in the Napoleonic Wars. He was entering all of these battles, especially with Great Britain, especially with Russia, even though he knew maybe this wasn't such a good idea. It's kind of like whenever your pride gets the best of you. I definitely think that happened to Napoleon. We also talked about how Great Britain and France were already rivals, kind of like Rooker and the Musty Mustangs. And so that's kind of like Great Britain and France. They were already rivals, and so that just kind of made him drive to really want something more than what was practical for the French Empire. So we're going to kind of end with this picture, so that way you can see that Napoleon was a strong general. He was a great military strategist. He did do some good things, but there are some ways that he went wrong, and we're going to hear that in video number 3.